I am Chloe Armstrong, 26 years old, and I woke up to the sound of splintering wood and snapping strings. My eyes shot open to find my apartment door wide open and my prized violin, a $15,000 instrument I had saved 3 years to buy, smashed to pieces across my living room floor. My twin sister Emma stood in the doorway with our parents, all wearing matching expressions of cold satisfaction. "Now maybe you'll stop showing off," my mother said, stepping over the scattered fragments of my dreams. Dad nodded approvingly. "Emma's Juilliard audition is tomorrow, and she doesn't need your music polluting her mind." I knelt among the ruins of my violin, touching the shattered neck where I had spent countless hours perfecting pieces Emma would later claim as her own. They had no idea what I would do next. Before I continue this story, let me know where you're listening from and hit that subscribe button, because the symphony of justice that follows will hit notes you never expected. Growing up as the naturally gifted twin in the Armstrong family was never the blessing people assumed it was. From the moment Emma and I could walk, our parents, Richard and Patricia Armstrong, had already decided which daughter would be their ticket into New York's elite classical music circles. The problem was, they chose the wrong twin. My earliest memory is sitting on the floor of our music room at age 4, listening to Emma's first piano lesson through the crack under the door. While she struggled to find middle C, I was silently playing along on an imaginary keyboard, my fingers automatically finding the correct positions. When the lesson ended and Emma ran off to play, I snuck into the room and climbed onto the piano bench. The moment my small fingers touched the keys, something magical happened. The melody that had been trapped in my head for an hour flowed out effortlessly, note perfect and beautiful. "What are you doing?" My mother's sharp voice cut through the music. I spun around, expecting to see pride or amazement on her face. Instead, I saw something that would define the next 22 years of my life: fear. "That's Emma's piano. You don't touch Emma's instruments." "But I can play it," I said, my 4-year-old logic simple and direct. "Listen." I turned back to continue the melody, but Mom's hands slammed down on the keys, creating a jarring crash of sound. "Emma is our musician," she said firmly, lifting me off the bench. "You find your own talents." I didn't understand then that my parents had already invested their entire social identity in having a musical prodigy daughter. They had joined the Metropolitan Opera Guild, donated generously to Lincoln Center, and spent months bragging to their wealthy friends about Emma's obvious musical gifts. To admit they had been showcasing the wrong twin would mean acknowledging years of embarrassing social and financial miscalculations. So instead, they doubled down. Emma received the best of everything: a Steinway grand piano that cost more than most people's cars, private lessons with professors from Manhattan School of Music, summers at prestigious music camps in Switzerland. I watched it all from the sidelines, officially relegated to the role of the athletic one despite having no particular interest in sports. But music called to me like a siren song. I discovered I could hear a piece once and play it perfectly. Not just the melody, but every harmony, every subtle dynamic marking, every emotional nuance the composer had intended. When I was 7, I snuck into the music room during Emma's lesson and found myself humming along with her Bach invention, except I was humming the parts she was missing, the inner voices that would make the piece complete. Mrs. Whitmore, Emma's teacher, stopped playing. "Who's humming?" she asked, looking around the room. Mom quickly ushered me away, but I caught Mrs. Whitmore's curious glance. She had heard something in my unconscious harmonizing that intrigued her professional ear. From that day forward, I was banned from Emma's lessons. By age 10, the pattern was firmly established. Emma struggled through scales while I taught myself violin by watching YouTube videos on an ancient laptop. She performed at student recitals to polite applause while I created complex compositions in my head, having nowhere to play them. When relatives visited and asked about the twins' talents, Mom would launch into elaborate stories about Emma's musical progress while describing me as more of a tomboy. The cruelest irony was that Emma knew. She had perfect pitch too. We were identical twins, after all, and she could hear the difference between her labored performances and the music that flowed effortlessly from me during the rare moments I could access an instrument. But she was as trapped in her assigned role as I was in mine. "I hate piano," she confided to me when we were 12, after a particularly difficult lesson that ended with her in tears. "I hear how it's supposed to sound, but my fingers won't cooperate. It's like there's a wall between what I know and what I can do. Maybe you could try a different instrument, I suggested carefully. Emma shook her head. You know Mom and Dad would never allow it. They've already sent out invitations to my recital next month. They've told everyone I'm playing the Moonlight Sonata. I had been secretly practicing that same sonata on the broken violin I'd found in our building's dumpster. In 2 weeks of evening practice sessions on the roof, I had mastered not just the original piano version, but had created my own haunting violin arrangement that brought out emotional depths Beethoven might never have imagined. That night, Emma crawled into my bed like we used to do when we were small. Sometimes I dream that we could switch places, she whispered. That you could be the musician and I could be anything else. What would you want to be? I asked. A music therapist, maybe. I love music, just not performing it. I want to help people heal with music instead of trying to be perfect at playing it. It was the first time either of us had articulated the fundamental misunderstanding that shaped our lives. Emma loved music but hated performance. I was born to perform but was forbidden to engage with music. Our parents had created a system that made both their daughters miserable in pursuit of their own social ambitions. High school brought new torments. Emma was enrolled at LaGuardia High School for the Performing Arts, despite barely meeting their admission requirements. I attended regular public school, where my academic excellence was treated as a consolation prize. At least one of our daughters is college material, Dad would say when report cards came out, as if academic achievement were somehow less valuable than Emma's C+ in music theory. The summer before our senior year, everything changed. Emma was attending Interlochen music camp while I had a job at the local music store to save money for college. Dr. Sarah Chen, a violin professor from Manhattan School of Music, came in looking for sheet music for her advanced students. She overheard me humming while I organized inventory, a complex Paganini caprice that I had memorized from a recording. "Excuse me," she said, approaching the counter. "Were you just humming the Paganini Caprice number 24? "Yes," I admitted, suddenly self-conscious. "I listen to a lot of classical music. Do you play violin?" I hesitated. The truth was complicated. Sort of. I'm self-taught. Dr. Chen's eyebrows rose. Self-taught Paganini? That's unusual. Would you be willing to play something for me? My manager, Mr. Rodriguez, overheard and gestured toward the small practice room in the back of the store. "Chloe can use the rental violin back there." With trembling hands, I picked up the instrument. It had been weeks since I'd been able to practice, and never on a violin this fine. The moment the bow touched the strings, magic happened. The Paganini caprice poured out of me, technically flawless but more importantly, emotionally transcendent. I wasn't just playing notes, I was channeling the composer's wild passion, his showing off, his joy in technical mastery. When I finished, Dr. Chen was staring at me with an expression I had never seen directed toward me before. "How long have you been playing?" she asked quietly. "About 6 years, but only when I can find instruments to borrow." "Who's your teacher?" "YouTube, mostly. And I listen to recordings." Dr. Chen was silent for a long moment. "Chloe, do you understand what you just did? That piece is considered one of the most technically demanding works in the violin repertoire. Conservatory students spend years preparing it. You just played it flawlessly after teaching yourself from recordings." She pulled out her phone. "I want to record you playing something else. Something you've never heard before." She pulled up a piece of sheet music on her phone. "Can you sight read this?" I studied the notation for 30 seconds, then played it perfectly. Dr. Chen's hands were actually shaking as she lowered her phone. "Chloe, you have what we call perfect pitch combined with exceptional musical memory. It's a rare combination that produces true musical savants. You could have a career as a professional violinist if you want one." The validation I had craved my entire life was finally being offered by someone who truly understood music. But even as my heart soared, reality crashed back down. "My parents would never support that," I said quietly. "My sister is the musician in our family." Dr. Chen looked confused. "Your sister?" "My twin. She goes to LaGuardia, studies piano." My parents have invested everything in her musical career. And they don't know about your abilities. They've forbidden me to play. They say it confuses Emma. Dr. Chen's expression shifted from confusion to something approaching anger. Chloe, suppressing talent like yours is not just wasteful, it's cruel. Would you be willing to study with me privately? The offer was everything I had ever dreamed of, but I knew the reality. I can't afford lessons. I'm not asking you to pay. Students like you come along once in a lifetime. I'd be honored to teach you. For the next year, I lived a double life. Officially, I was the academic daughter preparing for college. Secretly, I spent every moment I could with Dr. Chen, developing technique and musicianship that had been raw and intuitive into something refined and professional. She introduced me to repertoire I had never imagined, challenged me with pieces that would intimidate conservatory graduates. Most importantly, she gave me something I had never had before, compositions of my own. I had been writing music in my head for years, but Dr. Chen taught me to transcribe my ideas, to develop them into full pieces. Within months, I had created a portfolio of original compositions that showcased not just technical ability, but genuine artistic voice. These pieces are extraordinary, Dr. Chen told me after reviewing my latest composition, a violin concerto that blended classical structure with contemporary harmonies. They show the kind of musical maturity that usually takes decades to develop. Meanwhile, Emma continued struggling through her prescribed path. LaGuardia had been academically challenging for her, and she was barely maintaining the grades needed for graduation. Her piano playing had improved incrementally, but lacked the natural musicality that admissions committees look for in conservatory applicants. Our parents, however, remained convinced that persistence would eventually pay off. Emma just needs more time to develop, Mom insisted during one of their frequent conferences with her teachers. She's always been a late bloomer. What they didn't know was that Emma had been coming to me for help with her more challenging pieces. I would teach her the technical fingerings and help her understand the musical structure, essentially tutoring my sister in secret because our parents refused to acknowledge that she needed additional support. I'm not stupid, Emma said during one of our late-night practice sessions. I know you understand this better than I do. I know you could play circles around me. It's not about being better, I insisted. We just have different strengths. Chloe, she said, stopping in the middle of a Bach invention. What if I can't get into a good conservatory? What if I've spent all these years working toward something I'm not actually good at? The vulnerability in her voice broke my heart. Emma had spent so many years being praised for mediocre musical abilities that she had no realistic sense of where she stood. Meanwhile, I had spent so many years being ignored that I underestimated my own exceptional gifts. The college application process made everything worse. Emma applied to Juilliard, Curtis, Manhattan School of Music, and other top conservatories despite her teacher's gentle suggestions that she consider less competitive programs. I applied to academic programs, officially planning to major in physics or mathematics, while secretly hoping someday to transfer into music. Dr. Chen, however, had other ideas. Chloe, I've spoken with admissions directors at several conservatories. Based on your recordings and compositions, you could receive full scholarships to programs that Emma is unlikely to be accepted to at all. My parents would never allow it. What if they didn't have to know until after you were accepted? The idea was both thrilling and terrifying. Apply secretly, audition secretly, and present my parents with a fait accompli. But I couldn't bring myself to undermine Emma so directly, even if pursuing my own dreams wasn't technically taking anything away from her. That decision haunted me 3 months later when Emma's rejection letters started arriving. Curtis, Manhattan School of Music, New England Conservatory, one by one, her dreams were politely declined. Our parents became increasingly desperate, hiring expensive audition coaches and calling in favors with board members at various institutions. Finally, a breakthrough, Emma was waitlisted at Juilliard. This is just the beginning, Mom declared at dinner. The waitlist means they're interested. We just need to give them a reason to accept her. What they decided was to submit additional materials, specifically, a composition that would showcase Emma's creativity alongside her performance skills. The problem was, Emma had never written a successful composition. "I can't just create something from nothing," she told me frantically. "The deadline is in 2 weeks, and everything I write sounds like garbage." That night, I made a decision that would haunt me for the next year. I stayed up until dawn composing a piece specifically for Emma's application, a piano sonata that played to her technical strengths while hiding her musical weaknesses. It was beautiful, sophisticated, and completely unlike anything she had ever created. "This is incredible," she breathed when I played it for her the next morning. "But I can't submit your work as mine." "You're not," I said carefully. "I'm helping you develop your ideas. Siblings collaborate all the time." It was a rationalization and we both knew it. But Emma was desperate, and I was tired of watching her struggle when I could so easily help. Within a week, she had learned to play my composition competently, and our parents were convinced they were witnessing a breakthrough in her artistic development. The composition worked. Emma was accepted off the waitlist to Juilliard with a partial scholarship. Our parents were ecstatic. The acceptance party they threw became the social event of their season, with prominent members of New York's classical music community coming to congratulate the Armstrong family on their daughter's achievement. I watched Emma graciously accept praise for my composition while serving champagne to guests who had no idea the real composer was passing among them with a tray of appetizers. "You must be so proud of your sister," Mrs. Caldwell from the Opera Guild said to me during the party. "I am," I replied truthfully. I was proud of Emma's hard work and perseverance, even if I was conflicted about my own contribution to her success. What I didn't know was that my parents had become suspicious of Emma's sudden compositional breakthrough. They had been secretly recording my late-night practice sessions through the thin walls of our apartment, capturing hours of me working through pieces and creating new compositions. Initially, they planned to use the recordings as evidence that I was confusing Emma with unauthorized music making. Instead, they realized they had stumbled upon something potentially valuable. Without telling either Emma or me, they had been providing these recordings to Emma's composition teacher, claiming she had created the pieces during private practice time. Emma's teacher, impressed by the sophisticated musical ideas, had begun incorporating elements of my compositions into Emma's assignments, essentially teaching Emma to play simplified versions of my work. The deception had grown far beyond a single application composition. Emma's entire Juilliard portfolio was built on foundations of my musical ideas, filtered through her more limited technical abilities and presented as her original work. I remained unaware of this systematic appropriation of my creativity. I was busy preparing for my own future, having secretly auditioned for several conservatories at Dr. Chen's urging. My applications emphasized my original compositions and exceptional sight-reading abilities rather than formal training. To my amazement, I was accepted to multiple programs with full scholarships. "Chloe, these offers are unprecedented for someone without traditional conservatory preparation," Dr. Chen told me as we reviewed my acceptance letters. "Manhattan School of Music is offering you a full ride plus a stipend. They want you to start developing your compositions for professional performance." The prospect of finally pursuing my true calling was intoxicating. But I still couldn't bring myself to shatter my family's carefully constructed narrative by announcing my musical achievements. The crisis came 2 weeks before Emma's final Juilliard audition. I was working on a new violin concerto in my bedroom, using headphones connected to my laptop so I could compose silently, when I heard raised voices from the living room. Emma was crying, our parents were arguing, and someone was throwing things. I crept to my door and listened. "I can't do it," Emma was sobbing. "I can't perform that piece at the audition. It's too difficult, and it doesn't sound right when I play it." "You've been playing it for months," Dad said impatiently. "The scholarship depends on this performance." "It sounds different when I practice it alone," Emma protested. "During lessons, it flows naturally, but when I try to play it by myself, it's like the music disappears." "That's because you're not focusing," Mom snapped. "You're letting your nerves get in the way." What Emma couldn't articulate was what I understood instinctively. She had learned to play my composition by ear, absorbing the musical phrasing and emotional content from my recorded practice sessions. But without that unconscious reference point, she couldn't access the deeper musical logic that made the piece work. The argument escalated until Emma ran to her room and slammed the door. My parents remained in the living room, their voices dropping to urgent whispers. "She's going to embarrass us," Mom hissed. 3 years of telling everyone about our daughter the prodigy, and she can't even perform her own composition. "It's that girl's fault," Dad replied, and I realized with shock that he was referring to me. All that humming and tapping, confusing Emma's musical instincts. "The audition is in 2 days. We need to eliminate distractions." That night, I went to bed with no idea that my parents were planning something that would force our family's dysfunction into the open once and for all. I woke up to the sound of splintering wood. At first, I thought I was dreaming. The harsh crack of breaking timber filtered through my sleep, followed by the distinctive ping of snapping strings. Then I heard footsteps in my living room and muffled voices speaking in urgent whispers. My eyes flew open in panic. The digital clock beside my bed read 6:47 a.m., and sunlight was streaming through my apartment windows. I had been living independently for 8 months, having moved out after high school to a small studio apartment near the music store where I worked. My parents had keys for emergencies, but they had never used them. The voices in my living room became clearer as I fought my way out of sleep. "Make sure all the strings are cut," my mother's voice, cold and methodical. "Should I break the bow too?" My father's voice, equally clinical. "Yes. All of it. She needs to understand that music isn't her path." I scrambled out of bed and rushed to my bedroom door, my heart hammering with disbelief. Through the crack, I could see my parents systematically destroying my violin, the instrument I had saved for 3 years to buy, the beautiful German-made violin that Dr. Chen had helped me select. Dad was holding the neck of the violin while Mom attacked the strings with kitchen scissors. The body of the instrument lay in pieces on my coffee table, the elegant curves splintered and ruined. Scattered around them were the fragments of my music stand, my sheet music torn and scattered, and my bow snapped into 3 pieces. "What are you doing?" I gasped, yanking open my bedroom door. They turned toward me without surprise, as if my horror were an expected part of their morning routine. Emma stood behind them in the doorway, still wearing her pajamas, her face a mixture of shock and something I couldn't quite identify. "What needed to be done?" Mom replied calmly, as if destroying someone else's property while they slept was perfectly reasonable behavior. "Emma's audition is this afternoon, and she doesn't need your musical interference confusing her preparation." I stumbled forward, dropping to my knees among the wreckage. The violin I had loved, the instrument that had been my connection to music for the past year, was completely destroyed. The beautiful spruce top was cracked beyond repair, the maple back splintered into unusable fragments. Years of careful savings, months of anticipation, countless hours of practice all destroyed in a matter of minutes. "This is my apartment," I choked out, my hands hovering over the ruined pieces. "This is my violin. You had no right. You have no right to sabotage your sister's career," Dad interrupted, his voice hard with years of accumulated resentment. "For months, you've been playing music, filling this building with noise, disrupting Emma's concentration. Today is the most important day of her life, and we won't let you ruin it with your selfish need for attention." The accusation was so divorced from reality that I could only stare at him. I had been practicing with a mute on my violin specifically to avoid disturbing neighbors. My apartment was 3 miles from our family home. There was no possible way my practice sessions could interfere with Emma's preparation. "I've never tried to sabotage Emma," I said, tears streaming down my face. "I've only tried to support her." "Support?" Mom laughed, a brittle sound that made me flinch. "Is that what you call it when you show off at family gatherings? When you hum along with Emma's pieces, making it obvious that you think you could do better? When you fill her head with complicated musical ideas that confuse her natural instincts?" The last accusation hit too close to truth for me to dismiss entirely. I had helped Emma with difficult passages, had offered musical insights when she asked for them. But I had never considered that my assistance might be viewed as sabotage. "Emma asked for my help," I protested weakly. "Because you made her feel inadequate," Dad shot back. "Your entire life, you've been undermining her confidence, making her second-guess her abilities. Well, today that stops. Today, She performs without your shadow falling across her music. I looked past my parents to Emma, hoping to see some sign of protest or recognition that this was insane. Instead, I saw something that broke my heart: relief. Emma looked relieved that they had eliminated me as a factor in her audition. "Emma," I said quietly, "is this what you wanted?" My sister shifted uncomfortably, avoiding my gaze. "I just need to focus on my own music today." The betrayal was complete. Not just my parents' destruction of my property, but Emma's tacit approval of it. For a moment, I felt the familiar urge to shrink away, to accept their narrative and disappear from their lives entirely. But as I knelt among the ruins of my violin, something shifted inside me. Maybe it was seeing 3 years of savings destroyed so casually. Maybe it was realizing that no amount of self-sacrifice would ever be enough to satisfy my parents' need for control. Maybe it was finally understanding that Emma's struggles weren't caused by my presence but by years of being forced into a role that didn't suit her abilities. Whatever the catalyst, I felt something I had never experienced before: righteous anger. "Get out," I said quietly, rising to my feet. "Excuse me?" Mom's eyebrows rose in surprise. "Get out of my apartment. You've destroyed my property, violated my privacy, and committed what amounts to breaking and entering. Get out before I call the police." "Don't be dramatic," Dad said dismissively. "It's just a violin. We'll buy you a tennis racket or something more appropriate for your actual talents." "Get out," I repeated, my voice steadier now. "And leave your keys." They exchanged glances, clearly unprepared for resistance. After 26 years of successfully controlling both their daughters through manipulation and emotional blackmail, outright defiance was unfamiliar territory. "You're making a mistake," Mom said as they gathered their things. "Emma's audition is in 6 hours. This should be a day of family celebration." "Then go celebrate," I replied evenly. "Somewhere else." They left finally, Emma casting one last unreadable look over her shoulder. The moment the door closed behind them, I locked it, put on the security chain, and collapsed onto my couch, surrounded by the wreckage of my musical life. For several minutes, I just sat there, trying to process what had happened. Then, mechanically, I began gathering the pieces of my violin, as if collecting the fragments might somehow make repair possible. The neck was splintered lengthwise. The body was cracked in multiple places. The bridge was crushed, the tailpiece bent beyond use. Even if I had thousands of dollars for restoration, there wasn't enough left to restore. My phone rang. "Dr. Chen. Chloe, I wanted to confirm our practice session this afternoon before your Manhattan school audition next week," she said cheerfully. Then her tone changed. "Are you crying?" The story poured out of me: the destroyed violin, my parents' accusations, Emma's complicity, years of suppressed talent and stolen opportunities. Dr. Chen listened without interruption, her silence growing more ominous as I described the morning's events. "Where are you now?" she asked when I finished. "In my apartment, trying to figure out how to clean up the mess. Don't touch anything else. I'm coming over, and I'm bringing someone with me." An hour later, Dr. Chen arrived with Michael Torres, Emma's boyfriend and a fellow music student at LaGuardia. I was surprised to see Michael. Emma and I had never been particularly close, and I barely knew him, but his presence quickly made sense. "Michael has something important to tell you," Dr. Chen said gently. "Something about Emma's Juilliard audition." Michael looked uncomfortable, but determined. "Chloe, I need you to know that Emma has been struggling with today's audition piece for weeks. She's been having panic attacks, saying the music doesn't make sense when she tries to play it alone. I don't understand. The composition she's supposed to perform, she can't actually play it without reference recordings. She's memorized the sound, but she doesn't understand the underlying musical structure." Dr. Chen stepped forward. "Michael, tell her about the recordings." Michael ran his hands through his hair. "Your parents have been secretly recording you practicing. 4 months. Emma's teacher has been using those recordings to help Emma learn pieces, claiming they're recordings of Emma's private practice sessions." The room tilted around me. "What? That composition Emma submitted to Juilliard? The one that got her accepted? I heard you playing it months ago. Emma told me you helped her with some technical aspects," but Michael shook his head. That piece was entirely yours, wasn't it? The truth crashed over me like a cold wave. Not only had my parents been sabotaging my opportunities for years, but they had been systematically stealing my compositions and giving them to Emma. The Juilliard acceptance, the scholarship, Emma's entire musical identity all built on my work. How long have you known? I asked Michael. I started suspecting something months ago. Emma's playing improved dramatically in areas where she'd always struggled, but only for specific pieces. She could play your compositions beautifully, but struggled with everything else. When I asked her about her creative process, she could never explain how she developed her musical ideas. Dr. Chen was photographing the destroyed violin with her phone. Chloe, what your parents did this morning constitutes destruction of property worth $15,000. Combined with the intellectual property theft Michael is describing, you have grounds for serious legal action. I can't sue my family. You may not have a choice, she replied grimly. Because Emma's audition is in 4 hours, and she's about to attempt performing your composition in front of Juilliard's admissions committee. If she fails, and without your unconscious coaching, she probably will, your work will be associated with that failure forever. The implications hit me all at once. Emma would struggle through my composition poorly, the admissions committee would question their initial acceptance decision, and my musical ideas would be permanently linked with subpar performance. Meanwhile, I would lose my chance at conservatory training because my own compositions had been attributed to someone else. What can I do? I asked. Emma's audition starts in hours. Michael and Dr. Chen exchanged glances. Actually, Michael said carefully, there might be something. Emma has been asking me to come to the audition for moral support. What if you came too? As what? Her twin sister who isn't supposed to be musical? As yourself, Dr. Chen said firmly. It's time your parents faced the consequences of their behavior. The plan that emerged was both simple and terrifying. Dr. Chen would contact the Juilliard admissions office to alert them that there were questions about the authorship of Emma's submitted composition. Michael would arrange for me to attend the audition as his guest. If Emma struggled with the performance, which seemed likely given her recent panic attacks, I would be present to clarify the situation. What if this destroys her chances entirely? I asked. The thought of deliberately sabotaging Emma's dreams, even in service of truth, made me feel sick. Emma's chances are already in jeopardy, Dr. Chen pointed out. She can't perform music she doesn't understand. The question is whether the failure happens with you present to provide context, or happens in a way that damages both of you permanently. As we prepared to leave for Juilliard, I caught sight of myself in the mirror. The woman looking back seemed different, somehow older, more resolved. For 26 years, I had accepted the role my parents assigned me, believing that sacrificing my dreams was the price of family harmony. But family harmony built on lies and suppression wasn't harmony at all. It was time to let the music speak for itself. The Juilliard School's lobby was exactly as I had imagined it, elegant, intimidating, filled with serious young musicians carrying instrument cases and talking in hushed tones about auditions and repertoire. Michael met us at the entrance, his face tight with worry. How is Emma? I asked. Not good. She's been in the practice room for 2 hours, and I can hear her starting and stopping the piece over and over. Your parents are getting increasingly agitated. Dr. Chen handed me a folder. These are copies of your original composition notebooks, with dates and time-stamped photos. Just in case. We made our way to the audition waiting area, where families and friends sat in nervous clusters. I spotted my parents immediately, Mom clutching her purse with white knuckles, Dad checking his phone obsessively. Emma sat between them, her face pale and her hands trembling. The moment my mother saw me, her expression shifted from anxiety to fury. What is she doing here? She hissed, rising from her seat. I invited her, Michael said calmly. For moral support. Absolutely not, Dad interjected, approaching us with his jaw set. Emma doesn't need distractions today. I'm not here to cause problems, I said quietly. I just want to support Emma. Your support has done enough damage, Mom snapped. Security. Before the situation could escalate further, a Juilliard staff member approached our group. Armstrong family? We're ready for Emma's audition. Emma stood on unsteady legs, her face paper-white. As we filed toward the audition room, she caught my arm. "Chloe, I'm scared," she whispered. "I don't think I can do this." "Just breathe," I told her. "Remember that music is supposed to bring joy, not stress." "But what if I forget the piece? What if it doesn't sound right?" I looked into my sister's terrified eyes and made a decision that would change both our lives. "Then play something that does sound right to you," I said gently. "Play something that feels true." The audition room was smaller than I had expected, with a beautiful grand piano centered on a small stage. 3 professors sat at a table with evaluation forms, their expressions professionally neutral. Emma took her position at the piano bench while our parents and the other guests arranged themselves in the small audience area. "Miss Armstrong," the lead professor said warmly, "we're delighted to have you here today. Please begin with your original composition." Emma placed her hands on the keys, took a deep breath, and began to play. For the first few measures, everything seemed fine. She had memorized the opening of my composition accurately, and her technique was adequate if not inspired. But as the piece progressed into more complex territory, problems became evident. Emma's timing became uncertain, her phrasing mechanical. She was playing the notes correctly, but the music had no soul, no emotional logic. It sounded like someone performing a piece they had memorized without understanding. Halfway through the development section, Emma stopped entirely. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice barely audible. "Could I start over?" "Of course," the professor replied kindly. Emma's second attempt was worse than the first. Her hands were shaking now, and she missed several key modulations that were essential to the composition's structure. The professors exchanged glances, their expressions shifting from encouragement to concern. "Miss Armstrong," the lead professor said gently, "this is the same piece you submitted with your application, correct?" "Yes," Emma whispered. "Could you perhaps walk us through your compositional process? Help us understand the artistic choices you made in this section?" It was a standard question, the kind that any composer should be able to answer easily. Emma stared at the piano keys in silence, clearly unable to explain musical decisions she hadn't made. I was inspired by," she began, then trailed off helplessly. That's when I stood up. "Excuse me," I said, my voice carrying clearly through the small room. "I think there's been a misunderstanding about this composition." My mother's sharp intake of breath was audible throughout the room. "Chloe, sit down," she hissed. But I was already walking toward the piano, Dr. Chen's folder of evidence in my hand. "My name is Chloe Armstrong. I'm Emma's twin sister, and I'm the actual composer of the piece she's attempting to perform." The room erupted. My father jumped to his feet, my mother started speaking rapidly about family drama and inappropriate interruptions, and Emma buried her face in her hands. But the professors remained calm, their professional instincts taking over. "Miss Armstrong," the lead professor said, addressing me directly, "that's a serious allegation. Do you have evidence to support this claim?" I handed him the folder. Original composition notebooks with dated entries, time-stamped photographs of my handwritten scores, and recordings of my practice sessions where I developed this piece over several months. While the professors examined my documentation, I approached the piano. "Emma," I said gently, "it's okay. You don't have to pretend anymore." My sister looked up at me with tears streaming down her face. "I'm so sorry, Chloe. I never wanted it to go this far. I tried to tell them I couldn't do it, but they wouldn't listen." "I know," I said, sitting beside her on the piano bench. "This isn't your fault." "Miss Armstrong," the lead professor said to me, "would you be willing to perform this composition yourself?" I looked at Emma, seeking her permission. She nodded, scooting over to make room for me at the piano. The moment my fingers touched the keys, I felt like I was coming home. This was my music, born from my soul, developed through months of late-night creativity. As I began to play, the composition came alive in ways it never had during Emma's mechanical performances. Every phrase had emotional logic, every modulation served a dramatic purpose, every technical passage contributed to the overall narrative arc. I didn't just play the piece, I told its story. The opening theme represented a bird trapped in a cage, its melody confined and repetitive. The development section depicted the bird discovering its own strength, the harmonies becoming more complex and adventurous. The final movement was pure flight, technical passages that soared with joy and freedom rather than showing off for their own sake. When I finished, the room was silent except for Emma's quiet crying. "That," said the lead professor slowly, "was extraordinary. Miss Armstrong, Chloe, how long have you been composing?" "Seriously, for about 2 years. But I've been creating music in my head since I was 4. "And your musical training?" "Self-taught until last year, when Dr. Chen began working with me privately." The professors conferred quietly while my family sat in stunned silence. Finally, the lead professor addressed the room. "This is an unusual situation, but the evidence is clear. The composition we just heard is significantly different from the submitted recording, both in technical execution and artistic interpretation. It's obvious that Chloe is the original composer." He turned to Emma. "Miss Armstrong, Emma, we appreciate your honesty in this difficult situation. However, we cannot proceed with an audition based on misrepresented materials." Emma nodded, wiping her eyes. "I understand. I'm sorry for wasting your time. Actually," the professor continued, "we'd like to offer you an opportunity to audition with your own work. Do you have any pieces you've composed yourself?" Emma looked surprised. I've never really composed anything original." "What about performance? Is there a piece you feel confident performing that represents your actual abilities?" Emma thought for a moment, then turned to me. "Chloe, do you remember that Chopin nocturne you helped me learn last year? The one in E-flat major?" I nodded. Emma had genuinely connected with that piece, finding emotional depths in it that showcased her natural sensitivity even if her technique was limited. "Could I perform that instead?" Emma asked the professors. "Certainly. That would give us a better sense of your actual musical abilities." Emma's performance of the Chopin was revelation. Without the pressure of pretending to understand music she hadn't created, she played with genuine feeling and musicality. Her technique was imperfect, but her interpretation was heartfelt and personal. It was the performance of someone who loved music rather than someone trying to prove musical superiority. When she finished, the professors seemed genuinely moved. "Miss Armstrong, Emma, that was beautiful. It shows real musical sensitivity, even if the technical aspects need development." They conferred again, then addressed both of us. "We have an unusual proposal. Emma, your performance demonstrates genuine musical talent that could benefit from our preparatory program rather than direct conservatory admission. We'd like to offer you a place in our pre-college division with the option to re-audition for the full program after a year of intensive study." Emma's face lit up with relief and gratitude. "That sounds perfect. I've always felt like I needed more preparation." The professor turned to me. "Chloe, your compositional abilities and performance skills are remarkable. We'd like to offer you an immediate audition for our composition program, if you're interested." I looked at my parents, who sat in stunned silence. Their entire social identity had been built around Emma being the musical prodigy, and now they were watching that narrative crumble in real time. "I'd be honored," I said. Dr. Chen stepped forward. "Professors, I should mention that Chloe has already been accepted to Manhattan School of Music's composition program with a full scholarship." "Ah," the lead professor smiled. "Then we'll have to make our offer especially attractive." As we prepared to leave the audition room, Emma hugged me tightly. "Thank you," she whispered. "I know this was scary for you too." "We're both going to be okay," I assured her. "We're finally going to be able to pursue music on our own terms." My parents, meanwhile, were dealing with the social consequences of their deception. Other families in the waiting area had overheard parts of the confrontation, and word was spreading quickly through the close-knit classical music community. Years of bragging about their prodigy daughter's achievements were unraveling as people realized the truth. Richard, Patricia, Mrs. Whitmore, Emma's former teacher, approached them with a concerned expression. I couldn't help but overhear what happened in there. "Did you really submit Chloe's compositions as Emma's work?" My father's face was red with embarrassment and anger. "This is a private family matter." "It's also fraud," Mrs. Whitmore replied sharply. "And it's damaged Emma's reputation as well as Chloe's." I hope you understand the seriousness of what you've done. As we left Juilliard, my parents walked several steps behind Emma, Michael, Dr. Chen, and me. Their whispered arguments were audible even over the Manhattan street noise. "This is a disaster," Mom hissed. 20 years of building our reputation in this community, destroyed. "It's her fault," Dad replied, glaring at my back. "Always trying to upstage Emma, always making trouble." Emma stopped walking and turned to face them. "No," she said firmly. "It's not Chloe's fault. It's yours. You've been lying for years, forcing both of us into roles that made us miserable, and now everyone knows the truth." For the first time in our lives, Emma was standing up to our parents directly. "Chloe has been nothing but supportive of me, even when you were stealing her music and claiming I wrote it. I won't let you blame her for your choices anymore." My parents stared at Emma in shock. Their complaint, agreeable daughter had never defied them so directly. "Emma, you're upset," Mom began in her most patronizing tone. "You don't understand the bigger picture." "I understand perfectly," Emma interrupted. "I understand that you cared more about your social status than about either of your daughter's actual happiness or talents. I understand that you've been recording Chloe without her permission and giving her compositions to my teachers. I understand that you destroyed her violin this morning because you were afraid the truth would come out." The public nature of Emma's confrontation was drawing stares from other families leaving auditions. My parents' humiliation was complete and very visible. "We'll discuss this at home," Dad said through gritted teeth. "No, we won't," Emma replied. "I'm 26 years old, and I'm done pretending that your behavior is acceptable. Chloe and I are going to rebuild our relationship without your interference." That evening, Emma, Michael, Dr. Chen, and I had dinner at a small Italian restaurant near Lincoln Center. For the first time in our lives, Emma and I talked about music as equals, sharing our different perspectives and experiences without competition or hidden agendas. "I've always been jealous of how easily music comes to you," Emma admitted over pasta. "But I was also relieved when Mom and Dad focused all their expectations on me instead of you. I thought I was protecting you from the pressure." "I was jealous that you got to study music openly," I replied. "But I also felt guilty that my abilities came naturally while you had to work so hard for progress that I could achieve in an afternoon." "We were both victims of the same system," Dr. Chen observed. "Your parents created a dynamic that made you compete with each other instead of supporting each other's different strengths." Michael raised his wine glass. "To new beginnings. And to both Armstrong sisters finally getting to pursue music on their own terms." Over the following weeks, the consequences of my parents' deception rippled through New York's classical music community. Several organizations they belonged to began investigating other claims they had made about Emma's achievements. Mrs. Whitmore revealed that she had always suspected something unusual about Emma's sudden compositional breakthroughs but had given our parents the benefit of the doubt. Most painfully for them, their social circle began treating them as pariahs. The classical music world is small and tight-knit, and news of their fraud spread quickly. Invitations to galas and fundraisers stopped arriving. Their names were quietly removed from donor recognition lists. The social status they had spent decades building crumbled in a matter of weeks. Meanwhile, Emma and I both flourished in our new musical freedom. She thrived in Juilliard's preparatory program, finally able to learn at her own pace without the pressure of maintaining impossible standards. Her teachers recognized her genuine musical sensitivity and began helping her develop a more realistic career path focused on music education and therapy rather than performance. I chose to attend Manhattan School of Music, where my composition professor, Dr. Martinez, became a mentor and collaborator. My pieces began being performed by student ensembles, and I discovered the joy of hearing my musical ideas brought to life by other musicians. 3 months after the audition, I received an unexpected phone call from my mother. "Chloe, I think we need to talk." We met at a neutral location, a coffee shop in Manhattan that neither of us had ever been to before. Mom looked older than I remembered, her face drawn with stress and what might have been the beginning of genuine remorse. "I've been seeing a therapist," she began without preamble. "Not your father, he refuses to admit we did anything wrong. But I've been trying to understand how things went so far off track. I waited for her to continue, not ready to make this conversation easier for her. The therapist helped me see that I was so invested in the idea of having a successful musical daughter that I lost sight of what was actually best for either of you. Her voice cracked slightly. When Emma showed early interest in piano, I thought we had found her calling. When it became obvious that you had more natural talent, I was too proud to admit we had been wrong. It wasn't a complete apology, but it was more acknowledgement than I had expected to receive. The recordings, the stolen compositions, destroying my violin, those weren't mistakes, Mom. Those were deliberate choices to prioritize your image over your daughter's well-being. I know, she whispered. I know, and I don't expect you to forgive me. But I want you to know that I'm proud of what you've accomplished. Your music is beautiful, Chloe. It always was. The validation I had craved my entire childhood felt hollow now that I no longer needed it. But her acknowledgement of the truth was still meaningful. What about Dad? I asked. Mom's expression hardened. Your father is convinced that this is all a temporary setback. He believes that if we just wait it out, people will forget and things will go back to normal. He doesn't understand that we've lost our daughter's trust permanently. Have you? I asked directly. She considered the question seriously. I hope not permanently. I hope that someday, when I've done the work to become someone worthy of your trust, you might be willing to try rebuilding a relationship with me. It wasn't the dramatic reconciliation that might end a movie, but it was realistic. Trust, once broken so thoroughly, takes years to rebuild if it can be rebuilt at all. 6 months later, I received another life-changing phone call. This time, it was from the Lincoln Center Chamber Music Society. Miss Armstrong, we've been following your work through Dr. Martinez at Manhattan School. We'd like to commission a piece from you for our Emerging Composers series. My first professional commission. The piece I wrote, titled Twin Voices, explored the musical relationship between two instruments that shared similar ranges but had distinctly different tonal qualities, a violin and a viola, playing sometimes in harmony, sometimes in competition, sometimes supporting each other's melodies, and finally finding a way to create beauty together while maintaining their individual voices. Emma attended the premiere performance, sitting in the front row and crying openly as my music filled Alice Tully Hall. After the concert, she hugged me tightly. That piece, it's about us, isn't it? It's about finding harmony without losing individuality, I confirmed. It's about what we could have had all along if we'd been allowed to develop naturally instead of being forced into competition. I love it, she said simply. And I love that you're finally getting the recognition you deserve. Emma had found her own path as well. Her work in Juilliard's preparatory program led to an internship with a music therapy program at a children's hospital. She discovered that her natural empathy and genuine love of music, combined with more realistic technical goals, made her an exceptional music therapist. She was helping children heal through music, exactly what she had told me she wanted to do during our childhood conversation. As for my parents, Dad never acknowledged any wrongdoing and eventually cut off contact with both Emma and me rather than admit he had been wrong. Mom continued therapy and gradually began rebuilding very limited relationships with us, based on new boundaries and honest communication rather than manipulation and control. The destroyed violin was never replaced. Instead, I used the insurance money to purchase a professional quality digital piano and recording equipment, allowing me to compose and produce demos of my work from my apartment. The insurance company had investigated my parents' destruction of my property and ultimately covered the full replacement value, treating it as the criminal act it legally was. Dr. Chen remained a mentor and friend, often attending performances of my pieces and celebrating each milestone in my developing career. You know, she told me after a particularly successful concert, I've taught many talented students over the years, but I've never seen anyone transform pain into beauty as effectively as you do. I had good teachers, I replied, thinking not just of her formal instruction but of all the difficult lessons my family had inadvertently provided about resilience, authenticity, and the difference between support and control. A year after the Juilliard audition, Emma and Michael got engaged. She asked me to be her maid of honor, and this time, the request came without any family manipulation or hidden agendas. Their wedding was small and intimate, focused on celebrating their love rather than impressing anyone. I performed a piece I had written specifically for the occasion, a joyful composition that celebrated the beginning of Emma's life free from others' expectations. During the reception, Emma pulled me aside for a private conversation. "Chloe, I want you to know that I'm grateful for everything that happened, even the painful parts." Grateful? I was surprised by her choice of words. For the first time in my life, I'm doing what I actually want to do instead of what I think I should want to do. My work with the children at the hospital fulfills me in ways that performing never did. And our relationship is finally honest instead of based on competition. She paused, looking out at the dance floor where Michael was spinning a young cousin to delighted giggles. "I know it cost us both a lot to get here. The family drama, the public embarrassment, losing our relationship with Dad. But we're both free now to be ourselves instead of the roles they assigned us." As I watched Emma dance with Michael, her face glowing with genuine happiness, I realized she was right. The destruction of my violin had been the catalyst that forced our family's dysfunction into the light, but it had also freed both of us from a system that was slowly crushing our spirits. My own relationship with Michael's best friend David had developed naturally over the months following the audition. He was a music journalist who understood both the technical aspects of composition and the emotional journey I had been through with my family. Unlike the relationships I had attempted during my years of suppression, this one was built on complete honesty about who I was and what I wanted from life. "You know what I find most remarkable about your story?" David asked me one evening as we walked through Central Park after a concert. "It's not just that you survived your parents' manipulation, but that you transformed it into art that helps other people." He was referring to my growing reputation for compositions that explored themes of family dysfunction, personal authenticity, and the journey from suppression to self-expression. My music was being performed not just in classical venues but in therapeutic settings, where it resonated with people working through their own experiences of family trauma. "I think that's what art is supposed to do," I replied. "Transform pain into something beautiful that connects us to each other." 2 years after the audition that changed everything, I received an invitation that felt like the ultimate validation. The New York Philharmonic wanted to commission a full symphony from me, my largest and most prestigious commission to date. The piece I created, Symphony No. 1, Liberation, told the story of breaking free from imposed limitations and discovering one's authentic voice. The first movement represented suppression and constraint, with beautiful melodies that were constantly interrupted and undermined by discordant intrusions. The second movement depicted the moment of breaking free, violent and chaotic, but necessary. The third movement was a slow, healing meditation on rebuilding identity after trauma. The final movement was pure celebration, with themes from the earlier movements returning transformed and integrated into a joyful whole. Emma attended the premiere at David Geffen Hall, along with Dr. Chen, Michael, David, and even my mother, who had been working steadily on repairing our relationship. As the final notes of my symphony faded into silence, followed by thunderous applause, I felt a deep sense of completion. The little girl who had been forbidden to touch the piano, the teenager who had practiced violin in secret, the young woman who had watched her compositions claimed by someone else, all of those versions of myself were finally at peace. After the concert, a young violinist approached me during the reception. "Miss Armstrong, I'm a student at Juilliard, and I wanted to thank you." "Thank me for what?" "For showing that family dysfunction doesn't have to define us. I come from a similar situation, parents who have very specific ideas about what kind of musician I should be. Your music gives me courage to pursue my own artistic vision instead of trying to fulfill their expectations." Conversations like this had become common as my story spread through the classical music community. I received letters from young musicians whose families were pushing them into unsuitable roles, from siblings dealing with competitive dynamics, from anyone struggling to maintain their authentic self in the face of others' expectations. "I never intended to become a poster child for family dysfunction," I told Emma during one of our regular sister dinners. "But you're helping people," she replied. "And isn't that what the best art does? It makes people feel less alone in their struggles." Emma had completed her master's degree in music therapy and was now running her own practice, specializing in helping children process trauma through musical expression. She had found her calling, and it was beautiful to watch her thrive in work that genuinely suited her gifts. "Do you ever regret it?" I asked her. "The way everything unfolded, I mean. The public embarrassment, the family conflicts, giving up the Juilliard dream?" Emma considered the question seriously. "I regret the years we spent competing with each other instead of supporting each other. I regret that Mom and Dad's dysfunction damaged both of us. But I don't regret the truth coming out. Even the painful consequences were better than living a lie. As I approached my 30th birthday, I could honestly say I had built the life I had always dreamed of. My compositions were being performed internationally, I was teaching a small group of private students, and I was in a relationship built on mutual respect and shared artistic passions. Most importantly, I had maintained my authentic self throughout the journey. The final piece of the puzzle fell into place when I received a call from a documentary filmmaker who wanted to tell my story. "We're creating a film about sibling dynamics in artistic families," she explained. "Your story represents something important about the damage that can occur when parents try to manufacture talent instead of nurturing what naturally exists." I agreed to participate, but only if Emma was willing to share her perspective as well. The resulting documentary, Twin Voices, a story of music, family, and finding your authentic self, premiered at the Tribeca Film Festival and went on to win several awards for its honest exploration of family trauma and recovery. During the Q&A session after the premiere screening, a parent in the audience asked, "What advice would you give to families with multiple talented children?" Emma and I looked at each other and smiled. We had become comfortable sharing the stage, each contributing our unique perspective without competition. "Support each child's individual talents instead of trying to create artificial rivalries," Emma said. "Remember that success looks different for different people," I added. "And that forcing someone into a role that doesn't suit them helps no one." Most importantly, we said together, having rehearsed this response, "Remember that your children are individuals, not extensions of your own unfulfilled dreams." The audience laughed, but the message was serious. Too many artistic families create dynamics that damage all their children in the name of nurturing talent. As the credits rolled on the documentary that night, I thought about the little girl who had been forbidden to touch the piano. She never could have imagined the journey that lay ahead, the years of suppression, the mourning of violation, the difficult path to authenticity, and finally, the joy of creating art that helped other people feel less alone. My parents had tried to destroy my musical voice to preserve their carefully constructed narrative. Instead, they had inadvertently forced me to find my true voice not just as a musician, but as a person who refuses to be diminished by others' limitations. The documentary ended with footage of Emma working with her young clients at the hospital, her face glowing with purpose, followed by a recording of my symphony being performed by the New York Philharmonic. Two sisters, finally free to pursue their authentic paths, creating beauty in the world in their own unique ways. In the final interview of the film, I was asked what I wanted viewers to take away from our story. "I want people to understand that suppressing someone's authentic self never works long-term," I said, looking directly into the camera. "Truth has a way of emerging, sometimes gently and sometimes dramatically. The question is whether you'll be on the side of authenticity when it does." The destroyed violin had been replaced not with another instrument, but with something more valuable, the freedom to be completely myself. And that freedom had allowed me to create music that mattered, relationships that supported my growth, and a life that honored both my talents and my values. Sometimes the most powerful response to those who try to diminish you is not revenge, but living so authentically and successfully that their attempts to limit you become irrelevant. They tried to silence my music. Instead, they forced me to find my true voice. Have you ever had someone try to steal your authentic self? Have you experienced a moment when someone's attempt to control you actually led to your liberation? I would love to hear your stories in the comments below. And if this journey from suppression to authenticity resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more stories about finding your true voice in a world that often tries to silence it. Remember, your authentic self is the most powerful gift you can offer the world. Don't let anyone convince you to make yourself smaller to accommodate their limitations. Thank you for joining me on this symphony of healing, and I wish you courage in pursuing your own authentic path forward.